Hello and welcome to the next edition of the BriefingsDirect podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Intra Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on the latest insights into data center strategies. Enterprise IT strategists are adapting to new demands from the industrial edge, 5G networks, and hybrid deployment models that will spread more diverse data centers across more business settings. That's the message from a broad survey of 150 senior IT executives and data center managers on their perspectives on the future of the data center. IT leaders and engineers must update their data centers to exploit 5G and edge computing-fueled opportunities, as well as to transform their multiple data centers to leverage the explosive growth of data coming from nearly every direction. According to the Forbes-conducted survey, only a small percentage of businesses are ready for such decentralized and often small data centers that are needed to process and analyze data close to its source. Stay with us now as we unpack how more self-healing and automation will be needed to manage such dispersed IT infrastructure and hybrid deployment scenarios. Here to help us learn more about how modern data centers will extend to the computing edge and beyond is Martin Olson, Vice President of Global Edge and Integrated Solutions at Vertiv. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks a lot, Dana.
Martin, what's driving this movement away from mostly centralized IT infrastructure to a much more, diverse topology and architecture?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the way to probably really look at it, or the way I kind of look at it, is it's really more about the cloud coming to you. So while it certainly seems that we're moving away from centralized IT or centralized locations where we process data, I think it's more about the cloud sort of moving beyond that. So we're on the front steps of this profound re-architecting of the internet. And interestingly, there's really no finish line, or is there a prescribed recipe at this point here? But really need to look at the way we're providing compute or the way we're processing data very, very differently. Because over the past decade, and sort of a little bit beyond that, IT and compute have really become such an integral part of our businesses. So it's more than just the back-end applications like CRM and ERP and MRP systems that really serve as the rest of the organization, really become this integrated fabric of the way we conduct our business. So where we now take it for granted that we can access our favorite TV shows and movies anywhere from our personal devices. Well, that puts a really big strain on compute that's required beyond just the cloud. So cloud data centers and those hyperscale facilities that we see are still very much needed.
Martin, we've got way more devices. In fact, Cisco predicts there's going to be 28.5 billion connected devices by 2022. And KPMG is saying that 5G networks could carry 10,000 times the traffic of current 4G networks. So we're really looking at sort of an unknown here when it comes to what to expect from the edge.
That's right. And we, really started with the way we were accessing our home automation, right? That's kind of the starting point of all this here, beyond just content distribution networks here. So being able to access your home security cameras, adjust the temperature in the house, and, other things around home automation is now moving to business automation, where we use compute, we generate data, to develop, design, manufacture, deploy and operate our systems and our offerings to our customers in a much better and more differentiated fashion. And then you add to that trying to improve the customer experience when we interact with customers as well. So many, as you said, there's billions of devices going out there from either a century standpoint or personal devices that start generating just an unimaginable amount of data out there, which is what we've come to sort of know as edge computing here. So computing done at or near the source of data, much more so than in the past, where in the past it was really data meets consumption, right? We're pushing data out for consuming it, either as a function of email or some information we needed, whereas now it's much more data meets people. It's interacting with people in this distributed IT fashion. And then going beyond that, 5G is really making all of this possible here, and will be a key enabling in this when we move forward. So, we're seeing this paradigm shift in the way we use IT and compute. The amount of tech, just take an example, within manufacturing, the amount of tech that goes into a manufacturing facility, especially high-tech manufacturing, is just exploding with tens of thousands of sensors being deployed in just one single facility here to help dramatically improve productivity. And again, to help differentiate drive efficiency into the business. You look at retail operations, how much from a compute standpoint is required for location services, for offering a personalized experience as you both in the pre-shop phase, as well as when you go to the store, potentially brick and mortar, as well as the post-shop experience with a follow-up that goes with that. So, we need to deliver these services quickly. It requires a higher level of latency and bandwidth. I'm going to say lower latency, higher levels of bandwidth in order to be able to deliver this effectively. So, from that standpoint, it's really pushing out from a central standpoint into this distributed fashion, where we really need to be rethinking about how we deploy data centers, how we think about the future, and how we think about where these data centers are going to go, where are we going to be processing this data here.
So clearly the complexity we've been dealing with over the past 10 years about factoring in cloud, hybrid cloud, private cloud, multi-cloud is now expanding complexity back down into the organization, whether it's environment for retail, home and consumer, and certainly industrial and business to business. So the challenges are there. How are IT leaders and engineers going to update their data centers to exploit 5G and edge computing opportunities despite this complexity?
You really have to think about it differently, differently about it, your physical infrastructure. So if we kind of draw the line here is, where our focus is from a Vertiv standpoint, let's say, sort of have the data aspect of it and where that moves and how you process that. That's got to sit on a physical infrastructure somewhere, and that's got to be managed somehow. So you need to really be thinking differently about how you're deploying this physical infrastructure, how you operate and how you manage it. So this concept here of a data center has to really transform and evolve into, it's no longer just this big building, but it could be hundreds, thousands, 10,000s of smaller micro data centers. And these smaller data centers are going to be located in places we hadn't previously really imagined or considered that you would put infrastructure into. So one of the things that come to mind is that the reliance on on-site technical operational expertise, that has to evolve. You won't necessarily have that technical support that data center engineer walking the halls of this massive data center all day long. You're going to be in places, potentially a retail store. You're going to be in some back room in a manufacturing facility. It could be at the base of a cell tower. Again, it could be highly inaccessible, or certainly you would want to avoid as many of the so-called truck rolls as possible here. So you want to start looking at solutions that really offer more predictive operations, that has some self-healing capabilities within them, to where they can sort of fail in place, but still operate as a function of redundancy that's already built in. You want to focus on deploying solutions that has some level of zero touch provisioning to them, to where you don't have to go to every site to go set it up, configure it, but where it could be done remotely, or some automation being built into it. So in order to really think through this here, you got to consider the fact that where are these applications going to be hosted? That's not really clear right now. How much bandwidth is needed is not clear. The demand is not really clear at this point. As I said in the beginning, there's really no finish line to it. There's nothing that we can sort of draw up and say, this is what it's going to be. There is a version of it out there that's very much focused around home automation, content distribution, and now moving into sort of business automation. But again, not a prescribed way of us getting to that point. So there's this risk of, if you don't adopt the right technologies now, becomes a real concern for you in your organization and your ability to compete over time, because you can outdate yourself really, really quickly if you don't make the right choices here.
Right. So, of course, when you have such a change in your architecture and a decentralization of these micro data centers, you still need to have a focus on security, backup and recovery, contingency plans for emergencies. We're still trying to be mission critical, even though we're distributed. And as you point out, many of these systems are going to be self-healing, self-configuring, which requires a different set of skills. So we have a people, process, and technology sea change coming up. So tell us, you all wanted to dig into this and find out what people in the field are thinking, how they're reacting to such change. Tell me about the Vertiv Forbes survey, some of the top-line findings, what you wanted to accomplish with the survey, and what you found.
Yeah, so we really wanted to take a temperature. We wanted to take a gauge of what was really the thinking and sense of what the C-suite, the data center engineers, the data center community were sort of thinking out there as we were looking at this new world of edge computing, 5G, IoT out there. And it's sort of the top findings around was that need for a fundamental strategic change. We need a new mix of architectures that's far more decentralized, much more modularity within them, and then a new means to sort of manage and operate these data centers. To your point, as you say, some of the findings were that the C-suite alone, 11% of C-suite execs don't believe that they're currently updated ahead of current needs. They don't have the infrastructure ready to what's really needed in the future, and much less so with the data center engineers that we polled. 1% of them believe they're there, which means the vast majority, 99%, just doesn't believe that we have the right infrastructure ready to go do this here. And so there's this broad agreement that security, as you bring up, and bandwidth needs to be updated. Security is a big thing. We know from just our past experience in this field here, security concerns have always sort of stunned remote monitoring adoption in the past, but the sheer quantity of disparate sites that's necessary out there just makes that a necessity to be able to access, assess, and potentially reconfigure, remotely fix problems through remote monitoring and access to them. But again, it comes somewhat at a compromise of security at times. So at Vertiv, we're trying to drive a high level of configurability into the offering to where you can take our components, our products, and put them together in a multitude of different ways, given the utmost flexibility when you go deploy it. We are driving modularized solutions, so both in terms of modular data centers, but also modular in terms of, again, how it goes together on site. We're adding much more intelligence into our offering to where we're making the product smart, and that goes back to the remote sites, the lack of expertise and that thinning in knowledge that's going on out there. We need to be able to access this remotely. And where the last point that we're working on is the connectivity part of that, right? To be able to access these systems that are remote, assess them and optimize them remotely here.
And Martin, did the survey indicate whether the IT leaders in the field are also looking for such self-configuration technologies? Or is this something that they're anticipating or that they're demanding?
What we really saw and what we heard back here was that 24% of executives reported that over 50% or more of the data centers will be self-configuring or simply zero-touch provisioning by 2025. About a third of them say that more than 50% of their data centers will be self-healing by then. Now, that's not to say that they have all the answers with it. That's basically their prediction, their responses to us to where that's going to be needed in order to go solve for this year. Yet 29% of engineers say that they don't know what the percentage of the data centers will be self-configuring or self-healing. But there's an overwhelming agreement that this needs to happen. This is a feature. This is a capability that we need to be thinking about as someone like us, Vertiv, when we develop and we engineer our offering going forward here and what's going to be put in place out there.
So it's going to be interesting. There's going to be lots of potential points of failure, but there's going to be a whole new set of technologies designed to ameliorate problems as much as possible and automate them, and then also give people remote capability to come in and fix things as needed. Tell me a little bit about what the balance is between the automation and remote and how they might work together.
First of all, it's not just a physical infrastructure problem that you got to solve there. It has everything to do with the data and the workloads as well, so it's got to go hand in hand. It's certainly a partnership, and so it's a team of people, if you will, a team of organizations got to come together and help this here. But the way we're thinking about it is, being able, driving this intelligence into our products to making them more intelligent, making them smart in the way we develop and we offer them up, but also taking that data, and by the way, that data or telemetry that comes off of our systems here as they operate out there has got to be actionable data. It's got to be something that you can offer up to potentially non-technical people to go rectify a situation, to go make a change. I think thirdly, it's got to be able to communicate into the hypervisor platforms that already exist out there, whether that's from a virtualization standpoint or is containerization that happens in terms of how you manage applications out there, because fundamentally, you need to be able to decide and move your applications, your workloads to the most optimal points within the network. So for us, it's really we're trying to help alleviate that challenge by making our offering more intelligent and offering up actionable alarms and warnings and recommendations to an overall platform like that. But again, it takes a partnership with other companies, not just from a physical infrastructure standpoint.
And when that ecosystem comes together and you can provide essentially a constellation of data centers working in harmony to deliver services from the edge to the consumer, back to the data center, and do that around and around, a sort of a circuit, great things can happen. So let's ground this, if we can, a bit to the reality of what we're talking about. We're going to be enabling entirely new business models, entirely new capabilities. Are there some examples of how this might work across a couple of different verticals where we can illustrate to people how, when they've constructed their decentralized data centers properly, the payoffs are just astonishing?
Yeah, so as you point out, again, it's about the business outcome that we're going to go deliver out there in the field. And some of the examples of that is you take something like healthcare. There's obviously a shortage of expertise within healthcare and being able to provide that to rural areas, let's say. So being able to offer up specialist doctors, advanced healthcare, even in places that you wouldn't really imagine today, is going to require a level of compute and network that's going to be able to help you deliver that low latency all the way at the endpoint. So that could be essentially, imagine a truck that's fitted out with a medical imaging suite. Well, that's going to have to operate somewhat autonomously. The access to that, the connectivity, and which is where 5G comes in, becomes important as you process these images. They got to be rapidly loaded up into a central repository so it can be accessed by specialists around the world to potentially read these images here. So that requires two-way connectivity. That's just really key here in order to make that work, because the data, the amount of data that needs to move is just in the form of these images here is really significant, but provides that the ability to go really offer up that higher level of healthcare patient experience in places we couldn't do it before. So 5G plays into that. Being able to process and analyze some of this data even locally. So there would be aggregation points throughout the network to where you need compute, and that would have to reside on some level of infrastructure. And as I mentioned in the beginning here, places like base of cell tower is one of the places that have been talked about as could become a really focal point for this. As we all know, these are, when we drive past them on the highway or out in various parts of the country, they're not necessarily in populated areas. So as you imagine having 4, 5, 6 times as much compute sitting in these places here that are not easily accessible, or certainly you don't have technical staff that can go troubleshoot this here on site, that becomes really important. And then some other ones would be around augmented reality. So we talk about, from an education standpoint, think of technicians in the field, to where being able to use augmented reality when we dispatch a field engineer to go troubleshoot a system somewhere, making them as effective as possible. And again, not necessarily being able to send the people from around the world to deploy and having to go troubleshoot these sites here. Augmented reality becomes a huge part of this, to where basically you overlay what they're seeing in front of them through either 3D glasses or VR glasses to where you can help them through troubleshooting, fixing, optimizing whatever system they might be working on. Again, that requires compute right at the endpoint device. It requires aggregation points, again, requires that connectivity. It requires all the way back to the cloud as well. So it builds this whole complex network together. And again, the more advanced some of these use cases become, the more, very basic terms, the more sites, the more locations, remote locations we have to think through. We're going to have to deploy this infrastructure here, and then the way we access it as well.
Well, Martin, when I listen to you, I'm wondering, with all of these different types of data centers, with the increased complexity and capability of the networks, it sounds a little bit expensive. But are there efficiencies that you gain when you do a modern data center that's allowed the opportunity for augmented intelligence to be brought to bear, when you've done a full comprehensive design so that they're all playing together in harmony, the parts in the ecosystem? Is this hugely more expensive, or is there a mitigating factor that helps with the total cost?
Yes, I think the net footprint of compute is going to increase out there, and I don't think the cost is linear with that. And we've proven some of that with Vertiv here, and some of the technologies that we are developing and already have developed, or we've proven that at Vertiv, and the technologies that we've developed and we've already deployed out there. And that as the footprint increases, there's a fundamental need for driving energy efficiency into the infrastructure that goes out there. And that comes in the form of using more efficient ways of cooling the IT infrastructure that may sit there. So that could be economization, to which there's several options around that. It's new battery technologies. So from a ride-through standpoint, you start thinking about lithium-ion batteries, which Vertiv have solutions around this that makes it far more resilient, much more compact, and needs much less maintenance when it sits out there. So while net the amount of infrastructure that's going to go out there will certainly increase, we don't think it's necessarily going to be linear in terms of the cost of it, or at least the caution is you want to make sure you really pay close attention to that as an organization thinking of deploying edge computing here and really considering some of these new technologies there. That's going to help drive that percentage of energy efficiency down.
Right. And were there any insights from the Forbes survey that went to the cost equation? How do the IT executives expect this to shake out?
What we found was about 71% of the C-suite executives, they said that future data centers will reduce costs. And so that speaks both to, we believe, to the fact that there will be net more infrastructure out there, but it will be more energy efficient in the way it's going to run, but also it's going to reduce the cost of the overall business. So going back to the original discussion around the business outcome that they're trying to deliver here, deploying infrastructure in all these different places here is going to help overall drive down the cost of doing business. So really it's an energy efficiency play, both from a very fundamental standpoint in the way you simply power and cool the equipment, but also overall from a business standpoint in the way you deliver that customer experience, when you deliver your product, service, and operate them to your customers.
Well, it seems like a lot going on, but as you pointed out, the payoffs are substantial. The efficiencies are also quite impressive. How do organizations start to prepare themselves to get in front of this? As we indicated from the survey findings, not that many are feeling prepared yet. What should they be doing now in order to change that?
Yes, we talked about it's most of the organizations are somewhat unprepared for the future here, and not necessarily in agreement on some of the challenges here. And again, that goes back to the original statement around the lack of this finish line or this prescribed recipe here. So with very small percentage of the respondents here, 11% of executives, or only 11% of the executives believing that the data centers are ahead of current needs. Even less so for the data center engineers. Only 44% say that their data centers are updated regularly, and only 29% say that their data centers meet current needs. So what they have to do in order to prepare here going forward, seek partnerships here, getting the data centers upgraded, but also thinking through and understanding that, someone like a Vertiv, we have decades of experience in both designing for, deploying, and operating large data centers from a physical infrastructure standpoint. And the way we've used that to really take that knowledge base and driven that into what really now becomes the data center of tomorrow, which is a single IT rack. Because it could be a single IT rack going into any one of these locations, maybe a couple of them. But we take that learning, that experience that we have from that, and we drive that into what becomes the most smallest common denominator here in terms of a data center, which could be the rack. So it's working with someone who's got that experience, already has the data, has the offering to go help do that through configurable modular solutions that are intelligent, that provides that remote accessibility both to access, assess, and optimize remotely. It's managing that data that comes off of this here and extract that value out of it. The way we do that with some of our offering around life from a services standpoint, very prescriptive, actionable alarms and alerts that we send from our systems. And again, it's very, very few organizations can really do this on their own. And it's about the ecosystem that's being developed out there, working with companies like Vertiv, who's working closely with our strategic partners, both on the IT side, storage, network, all the way through to applications, that it really works in unison. So thinking through how do you efficiently add this compute capacity in these new locations? What do those new locations look like? What are the requirements from a security standpoint? There's a resiliency aspect to it as well. There may be in harsh environments as you think through high-tech manufacturing, ensuring that infrastructure is scalable while minimizing CapEx. So we don't all have the freedom to just go build it and they will come. So thinking through the modular aspect of it, building for a future that may be somewhat murky at this point, but deploying modular systems that you can easily augment and add to that capacity or redundancy to over time. And then something that's really offer a robust remote management platform with it. I think this is some of the things you want to be thinking about.
Well, great. Now, this is one of the very few empirical research assets that I've come across, this Vertiv and Forbes collaboration, the survey. Where can people find out more information about it if they want to dig into the details? Is this going to be available?
We want to make this available to everybody to go review. Again, in all the interest of sharing the knowledge of this new frontier, this new world of edge computing. So we'll absolutely be making this research and study available. Want to encourage people to go visit vertiv.com to go find more information and download the research results from there.
Well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how enterprise IT strategists are adapting to the new demands from the industrial edge, 5G networks, and hybrid deployment models, and how we expect that to spread to more diverse data centers and their use across more business settings. And we've learned, according to a recent Forbes-conducted survey, that only a small percentage of businesses are ready for such decentralized architectures and are often looking to small data centers to process and analyze data very close to its source. It's a whole new model. So please join me in thanking our guest. We're here with Martin Olson, Vice President of Global Edge and Integrated Solutions at Vertiv. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you, Dana.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining this sponsored BriefingsDirect Data Center Strategies interview. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Vertiv-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your IT community, and do come back next time.